Nestled in the heart of the Colorado Rockies, the Stanley Hotel is known as much for its beauty as it is for the lingering spirits that roam its halls. Opened in 1909 by Freeland Oscar Stanley, it was originally designed as a luxury retreat for the elite. But for all its elegance, the Stanley holds a much darker legacy, one that continues to chill the bones of those who dare to stay the night. Its haunted reputation has spanned over a century, fueled by both whispered stories and first-hand encounters with the supernatural. The Stanley became widely known after it inspired Stephen King to write The Shining, but the hotel's history of paranormal activity began long before King's visit. Room 217, where King stayed, holds a particularly ominous reputation. In 1911, a gas explosion nearly killed Elizabeth Wilson, the head housekeeper. She survived but sustained severe injuries. Since her death, many believe her spirit remains tied to this room, still taking care of the guests as she did in life. Those brave enough to stay in room 217 have reported strange, unsettling experiences. One couple awoke to find their belongings neatly unpacked and folded, despite leaving everything scattered the night before. Another guest reported feeling a sudden pressure on the bed, as if someone had sat beside them in the darkness. When they turned on the light, no one was there, but the indent on the mattress remained. But the most chilling account comes from a solo traveler who stayed in room 217. Around 2:17 a.m., he was startled awake by the sensation of someone tugging his blankets off the bed. He opened his eyes to see a woman, dressed in turn-of-the-century attire, standing at the foot of his bed. Her face was pale and emotionless, her eyes fixed on him. He blinked, and she was gone. But the cold, unsettling feeling lingered. The next morning, he asked the front desk if anyone else had entered his room during the night. Their only response? Welcome to the Stanley. Room 217 may be the most famous, but it's far from the only haunted spot in the hotel. The Grand Ballroom, once a lively center for music and celebration, is now home to ghostly echoes of the past. Guests have reported hearing the soft, distant sound of a piano playing late at night, though the ballroom remains empty. Some even claim to have seen the hotel's original co-owner, Flora Stanley, seated at the grand piano, her fingers moving gracefully over the keys. The ballroom isn't the only place where guests have encountered Flora Stanley. One guest, staying on the top floor, awoke in the middle of the night to the sound of footsteps. He opened his eyes and saw a woman in a flowing white gown walking down the hallway, her face serene but distant. Thinking she was a guest, he followed her, only to watch her disappear through a closed door. Later, he learned that the top floor was once Flora's private quarters. And then there are the sounds: laughter, footsteps, and whispers in empty hallways. Guests on the fourth floor, once the servants' quarters, have reported hearing the playful giggles of children. One guest swore he felt a small hand grip his as he walked down the corridor, only to find no one beside him. But perhaps the most unsettling entity that haunts the Stanley is Mr. F.O., Stanley himself. Seen often in his favorite spot, the billiard room, Mr. Stanley continues to oversee his grand estate, even in death. Guests entering the room have reported an overwhelming feeling of being watched, and some have even seen his apparition standing near the fireplace, surveying his guests with a stern, watchful eye. In the heart of the Ozark Mountains lies the Crescent Hotel, often called America's Most Haunted Hotel. Built in 1886, the Crescent's history is as eerie as its towering exterior. Over the years, the hotel has served many purposes: a posh resort, a college, and most infamously, a hospital for cancer patients run by the notorious Dr. Norman Baker. Baker, a man with no medical training, convinced desperate patients that he could cure cancer with his fraudulent treatments. Many came in search of hope, but few left alive. It's said that the souls of Baker's victims still roam the Crescent's halls, forever trapped in the place where they suffered so much pain. Visitors have reported seeing figures in hospital gowns, hearing moans in the dead of night, and experiencing an overwhelming sense of dread as they pass through the former hospital's morgue. One of the most chilling stories from the Crescent comes from a hotel guest who participated in one of the many ghost tours offered here. As the group descended into the morgue, they heard a faint, metallic scraping sound, like a gurney being moved across the floor. The guide assured them it was just the wind, but as they continued, the sound grew louder and more distinct. Then, without warning, a heavy steel door at the end of the hall slammed shut with a deafening bang. The group rushed to open it, but when they did, they found an old gurney, which had been empty moments before, now holding the transparent figure of a man in a hospital gown. He lay still, staring blankly at the ceiling, before slowly vanishing into the air. The apparition is believed to be one of Baker's patients, perhaps one of the many who were promised a cure but met a different fate instead. His spirit, along with others, still lingers, trapped between this world and the next. Room 218 is another of the Crescent's haunted hotspots. It's said to be haunted by Michael, an Irish stonemason who tragically fell to his death during the hotel's construction. Guests staying in room 218 often report hearing the sound of footsteps pacing the room at night, and some have even felt a sudden pressure on the bed, as if someone had sat down beside them. One couple, staying in room 2118, awoke in the middle of the night to the sound of faint tapping on the window. At first, they thought it was just a branch brushing against the glass, but when they looked outside, there were no trees, only the sheer drop of the hotel's stone walls. The tapping grew louder, more insistent, and then stopped. Moments later, the bed dipped as if someone had sat on the edge. The couple held their breath, too terrified to move. When they turned on the light, the room was empty, but the impression on the mattress remained. Michael's spirit is playful, but others are far more sinister. Guests exploring the third-floor hallways have reported sudden drops in temperature, whispers in their ears, and an overwhelming sense of being followed. Some say they've seen shadowy figures darting across the corridors, disappearing into the walls. One of the most disturbing encounters occurred in the middle of the night when a hotel staff member was making her rounds. As she passed the old laundry room, she heard the sound of humming, soft, melodic, but unmistakably human. When she opened the door, the room was empty, save for a single laundry cart that had been left out. She turned to leave, but as she did, the cart began to move on its own, rolling slowly across the floor. She fled, leaving the room locked behind her. The RMS Queen Mary, once a luxury ocean liner and now a floating hotel, is home to some of the most chilling paranormal activity in the world. During its time at sea, the Queen Mary served as both a passenger ship and a troop carrier during World War II. But over the years, tragedy struck again and again, and many lives were lost aboard the ship. Today, it's said that the spirits of those who perished aboard the Queen Mary still walk its decks. The most famous haunting aboard the Queen Mary is that of a young sailor who met a tragic end in the ship's engine room. During a routine drill, he was crushed to death by a heavy steel door. Guests and crew alike have reported hearing the sound of the door slamming shut, followed by frantic footsteps and desperate cries for help. A paranormal investigation team once spent the night in the engine room, hoping to document the strange occurrences. Around midnight, the team heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps, heavy, echoing, and coming from deep within the room. One of the investigators felt a sudden chill, as if someone had passed right by him. He turned around, expecting to see one of his teammates, but instead, he was greeted by the faint outline of a young man in an old Navy uniform. The figure stood still for a brief moment before slowly walking toward the heavy steel door. Just as it reached the door, it disappeared, leaving only the sound of the door slamming shut behind it. The young sailor is one of many spirits believed to haunt the Queen Mary. The ship's first-class swimming pool is another notorious hotspot for paranormal activity. Though the pool has been empty for decades, guests often report seeing wet footprints trailing along the deck, as if someone had just stepped out of the water. One of the most well-known spirits in the pool area is that of a woman in a long white gown, often seen walking along the edge of the pool, her face expressionless, her eyes distant. Some say she was a passenger who drowned aboard the ship, her spirit forever tied to the place of her demise. But the pool is also home to a more playful spirit, that of a little girl, often heard giggling and splashing in the empty pool. Guests have reported hearing the sound of a ball bouncing along the pool deck, only to find nothing there when they go to investigate. The Queen Mary's haunted legacy doesn't end there. The ship's long corridors are filled with unexplained footsteps, ghostly whispers, and the occasional sighting of shadowy figures darting between the rooms. Some guests have even reported waking in the middle of the night to find ghostly passengers standing at the foot of their beds, staring silently before vanishing into thin air. These 3 hotels, each with their own stories of tragedy, mystery, and the supernatural, serve as reminders that the past never truly dies. The spirits of the Stanley Hotel, Crescent Hotel, and the Queen Mary walk among us, their stories written in the walls, floors, and rooms they once inhabited. For those who dare to visit, the question remains, will you leave with your own ghostly encounter? Or will the haunted whispers of America's most haunted hotels follow you home? If you survived this nightmare, there's more waiting for you. Subscribe now and join us. Hit the bell so you're the first to witness our next fright.